Welcome to Mindshock. This is your host, Bruce McGuire.
And JR.
And this is Jeffrey Dahmer, episode 2, Further Down the Rabbit Hole. If you thought we were a bridge too far in the previous episode, the most comprehensive and exhaustive podcast on Jeffrey Dahmer in existence, and we are continuing our investigation in a logical fashion into MK Ultra ties, Dahmer's father, the Adam Walsh conspiracy, that there was some kind of cover-up for whatever reason, to blame some hick without even a fully functioning brain who had confessed to hundreds of murders he didn't commit. There's actually talk that he might have not even committed a single one. But we'll get to all of that and more on the Mindshock podcast. If you find the podcast interesting and informative and want to help support Mindshock delve into more topics, true crime, the paranormal, conspiracies, in an objective and logical fashion, unlike any other media source, you could donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications, like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. And all the Dunning-Kruger styles are welcome. I find them highly amusing at how all the coincidence theorists hallucinate that there's no chance that Dahmer could be connected to MK Ultra despite quite an extensive stack of coincidences, which, if you thought they were crazy in episode 1, you ain't heard nothing yet, JR. You ain't heard nothing yet. But to set the stage on the nature of Dahmer and his time in prison and his mentality from an outsider who met him after he was already a killer, we are going to the highly esteemed publication known as The Sun US. This is an article published recently by Tariq Tahir, October 8, 2022. My friend Jeff. I baptized Jeffrey Dahmer. He told me about eating victim's bicep, but here's why I helped him and we became friends. The minister who baptized Jeffrey Dahmer has told how the cannibal serial killer told him horrific details about his crimes, but they still became friends. Now, before I continue this, JR, would you become friends with a guy like that?
Like, baptized into what religion?
Christianity.
Okay. I just had to, ordinarily, I guess that would kind of just go without saying, but, not in this case, Bruce.
Well, I don't know the denomination, perhaps they'll get into it. But just in general, see, the thing that's curious to me, that if Dahmer really was some MK Ultra Phoenix Project subject, and he was thoroughly brainwashed into committing these crimes, or more disturbing still, if he was specifically groomed by his father to become this military test subject, which we'll explore as well, technically, is it really his fault? I know that's a highly controversial position, but if all of this is true, and I'm not alleging it is, for all the triggered Dunning-Kruger goofs who immediately think I'm alleging something is true, for the billionth time on Mindshock, I am not alleging anything is true or untrue. We're not going to fall for any kind of logical fallacies here. This is Mindshock, where the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. So if it's true, theoretically, that can happen to anybody.
Yeah. Well, I mean, see, here's my thing. Whether or not he was brainwashed by MK Ultra, whatever, how was he found legally sane?
Well, we went over that.
I mean, it doesn't really, see, for me, all that, minutia over, whether he came from an Oblivion Gate, Shadow People, was beamed down here by aliens, was, reprogrammed by MK Ultra, or he was just a normal guy. How was he found, sane at trial?
I don't know about you, but for me, that's actually the least surprising thing of his existence. For me, it's more curious the level of luck he must have possessed to leave his door open, dead bodies clearly visible in the bedroom. You know, this vat of...
Well, there was that, lady that cleaned his house, too.
I mean, the guy that he assaulted that went to the police with a description and exact address they never followed up on. The parole officer who didn't visit him a single time. I mean, just how many offenses he's getting off scot free every single time. I
Well,
mean,
not to mention he's still like an alcoholic, so like they normally draw attention to themselves, like generally, like when they're like completely drunk.
yeah, I mean, he's supposedly torturing his roommate on the military base. Which, by the way, if you think that was a bridge too far, wait until the new information I have discovered about his other antics at the base. So, anyway, continuing on with this minister here, church leader Roy Ratliff. I mean, I know what you mean about the name generator. I mean, it's kind of
Yeah,
it's kind of in overdrive for this case as opposed to other cases. Church leader Roy Ratliff even revealed he felt a
and it's so '90s too,
yeah,
like the names.
he revealed he felt a sense of grief when Dahmer was brutally murdered with an iron bar by fellow inmate Christopher Scarver. His savage death came just a few days after Roy received a Thanksgiving card from him in which the killer spoke of their friendship. Now, you know, yeah, we're not talking about a Christmas card here. We're talking about the Milwaukee cannibal sending a Thanksgiving card. I mean, again, is this whole thing a psyop? But anyway, so a Thanksgiving card from him in which the killer.
Was the guy white or black?
He was an old white guy with a balding head and a white beard.
That's interesting in and of itself.
This serial killer was serving a life sentence for the disturbing and gruesome murders of 17 boys and young men, but while he was behind bars, he claimed to have found God.
Yeah.
In an exclusive interview, Roy told The Sun Online about his conversations with the man he calls Jeff. He revealed the gruesome details the killer shared about eating part of one of his victims. You know what else is weird? There's a little advertisement here. Rest for the wicked. Dahmer's urn that held the killer's remains is for sale. Anyway,
You know what's also weird? Like this guy supposedly is like a minister that baptized him, but like he's like selling his story to the Sun. Like,
I mean, I don't
isn't
know.
that kind of like isn't that kind of against like the priesthood? Like aren't you supposed to like kind of like keep that information private?
I mean, there's also another advertisement here. Pieces of me, Britney Spears, gets totally naked for the most explicit photo shoot yet after Singer's sons begged her to stop stripping off.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a highly esteemed publication known as The Sun. Like, you know?
Aren't they like ranked lower than the Inquirer?
I mean, they're highly credible.
Yeah. Yeah. Available at grocery store end caps at registers everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking through some of their other stuff. Yeah, it's interesting to say the least. Roy, 75, was working at a church in Wisconsin where Dahmer committed his crimes and was later jailed. He had been asked by another minister from Oklahoma if he would baptize Dahmer, who had expressed his wish to do so after finding God. After several balked at the prospect of being in a room with the mass murderer nicknamed the Milwaukee Cannibal, eventually Roy agreed to carry out the baptism. I said, okay, sure, what's his name? And the guy who had called me said, you might want to sit down for this. Then he told me, it's Jeffrey Dahmer, Roy told The Sun Online. Roy said at the time he was relatively ignorant of the details of Dahmer's crimes, and it was only when his wife said, you ought to learn more about him, that he began reading more on the topic. Wasn't a pre-internet, pre-social media age interesting?
Yeah, it was. It was also interesting how like a priest called another priest because he didn't want to like piss off God by baptizing him,
Well,
so he
I'm
had to
not
call
sure that
another
was the
priest.
case. It sounds like the other guy was in Oklahoma, so he was too far away, and he was just looking for people who were closer. That's what it sounds like, but I don't know. Aren't they like obliged to do it if they truly believe the individual has found God, like regardless of their past? if in the present moment they truly believe the individual has found God, then their path doesn't matter. Isn't that by the book?
I mean, I guess, but like, I mean, and I'm just reaching here, Bruce. I mean, I'm definitely not cut from like, the holiest cloth, but like, if I were in his shoes, I think I would have recommended an exorcism. Like, I don't really know if, a baptism would have, I mean, maybe after the exorcism, but like, I definitely would have gone with the exorcism first.
Well, knowing Dahmer, they probably could have made a movie out of that in his favorite series.
Yeah. Yeah, they probably would have thrown that script back at you.
When I first met him, I didn't know the grisly details, and I think it was better not to know because it allowed me not to be prejudiced towards him. Roy made his first visit to prison to meet Dahmer in April '94 and was led through the doors where the banging was a little disconcerting to a room with just a table and chairs to wait for Dahmer. He had been warned to take off his tie in case it was used as a weapon and began to notice he was sweating while he waited. Then, in a few minutes, Jeff enters the room and closes the door and shakes my hand, then sits across from me, he said. I was impressed about how courteous he was and how willing he was to be cooperative. He was considerate, which I found surprising. Given that he had killed people, I thought he would be a rougher person, but he was gentle as far as I could see. For a moment there, I'm thinking I'm in a room all by myself with a man who's murdered so many people, and I was a little apprehensive. I was thinking, what's going on here? I mean, that was good of the guards, too, to just leave him alone there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, no supervision of any kind. Like, and like they let him shake his hand too. Like,
Yeah,
I guess there weren't cuffs.
I believe if this, yeah, I know. I believe if this was a script, they would call, this is what's known in Hollywood as a Swiss cheese script.
Yeah.
There's a lot of holes here. I mean, there's actually nothing but holes.
Yeah, there's like more holes than there is cheese, Bruce.
Then we started talking about he wanted to be baptized, and after that, I forgot about being apprehensive. In fact, Dahmer had been scared of meeting Roy and heaved an unusual sigh when he agreed to baptize him. I said, "Why did you make that sound?" And he said, quote, "I was afraid of meeting you because I thought you would say I can't baptize you because you've been too evil." End quote.
Like Jeff, I have to say, like, that's a pretty reasonable, that's a pretty reasonable thing for Jeff to say.
But if a man is seeking repentance for his sins, then I should help him. That's all I was thinking about. As they started talking, Dahmer began to open up about the dark aspects of his crimes, in particular, his cannibalism. He confessed to me that he ate a bicep of one of his victims. I knew there was cannibalism in his story. I didn't think he was playing around and that it was a genuine confession. There was no question in my mind that he hadn't done these things. In my mind, I think there was no one there to stop him, and one thing led to another and to another. Hold on a second, JF. I mean, I'm all for respecting the men of the cloth, but wouldn't you say one thing led to another is letting Jeffrey Dahmer get off the hook just a tad? Just a
Yeah, I think
tad?
that it's putting it quite lightly, Bruce.
No one was there to stop him, so one thing led to another.
I mean, I kind of get the feeling that everybody's just like, oh, it was just Jeff being Jeff. Like, it was just boys being boys.
No,
Like,
hold on a second.
like,
Hold on a second. I could possibly understand maybe even hitting somebody. Maybe even that one guy that he bopped on the head that escaped to the police and gave him Dahmer's address that they
I mean,
never
the one that
bothered.
was like, who had a hole in his head with hydrochloric acid and was bleeding from his
Well,
genitals,
see,
and he was 14 years old.
I would say that's a little bit of a bridge too far when you're talking about one thing led to another. That's a bit far.
Yeah, well, especially considering that he was a minor at the time.
Well,
like,
not to mention preserving skulls and like painting. I mean, that's quite. I would say that's a step further than one thing led to another. I mean, the altar itself. I mean, I would say that's well beyond one step led to another. One thing led to another. I mean, I don't know what this guy's deal is. I mean, can you figure it out, or do you think he went? He's buddies with like the prosecution and all the court officials and the court experts, psychiatrists.
I think, honestly, I believe that, this is going to sound really weird, but, like, I think Dahmer was ahead of his time. I think that, like, his, like, actual crime was so fucking twisted. I mean, this is if we're not gonna go the MK Ultra route. Like, if we're going the normal route, I think it was just so heinous and so out there, and it was like, the 80s, like, where like we still hadn't like fully like DNA and everything was still in its infancy, like to where they weren't like really like used to dealing with shit like that. I mean, he's kind of like almost like a storm of the century type killer. Like we've had other like Vlad the Impaler. Like there's been other people that are just as twisted, but like you have to go back through history to find them. You know what I mean? Like a lot of murders aren't the Jeffrey Dahmer type. Like he's really like in his own league of completely fucking nuts. So, I think that like the people that were like prosecuting him and like the normal like detectives and stuff, I think they were used to just your normal drug deal gone bad type robbery. They weren't used to like someone who's devoted their entire, because like his entire life was devoted to his like, I mean, this was like his real job. Like I don't understand how he was actually employed, but like, especially because he was still an alcoholic as well. But like, I mean, this was like his full-time career, killing these people. So,
Well, if you're in the camp that he did it, I suppose some people are theorizing that he had some help and he didn't do it all on his own, which we'll get to. We'll get to that.
well, I
But
actually think that's a pretty good
well,
like theory.
we'll get to it. So this priest is saying, in my mind, I think there was no one there to stop him, and one thing led to another and to another. He's like the quote from Shakespeare about being so deep in the blood that you can't get out. Do you think this priest is making excuses for Dahmer? I mean, he's invoking Shakespeare now.
I think, I mean, if anything, he's probably trying to do the whole "there's good in everyone" spiel, and like I find it difficult to believe that like you know there's any silver lining there. You know what
Well,
I mean?
I would
Like,
say if the MK Ultra theory is true, though, and he's got a split personality, and one personality is relatively normal, and then the other one is the tortured soul reenacting the torture, it kind of makes sense. But anyway,
well,
continuing the
he
article.
could have a split personality without being a part of MK Ultra,
Of
but
course, I'm
like,
just saying it seems more likely if he was in some kind of Phoenix program operation that it would become a split personality because that's the only way that a mind could survive. Obviously, there could be other scenarios as well. Roy said his cannibal persona was part of Dahmer's self image and something he used with chilling effect on those around him. I was told by one of the prison guards that he would say to a guard standing outside his cell, I bite. It was close enough only for a guard to hear, and the guard would be shaken by that.
yeah.
He also had a poster in his cell that read, Cannibals Anonymous meeting here tonight.
Well, that's him just like trying to fuck with people, probably because he wanted to be left alone. Like, I mean, like seriously, like.
Well, also, if he used to be this prankster in high school, he just can't handle boredom too well. I mean, you know?
Well, I mean, really, when you think about it, I mean, when they come to visit him, like, it's a conversation piece.
It was a means of attracting attention to himself, yet at the same time communicating, don't get too close to me, I might hurt you. Dahmer was baptized on May 10th in a whirlpool used to treat inmates when they hurt their back. So, like, how often do hit inmates? I mean, are there routine beatings and stabbings where they need a rehabilitation whirlpool in the prison? I've actually never heard of that before.
Yeah, I've never ever heard of that at all. That it's like, I mean, was it like a Whirlpool brand, or was it just like,
It
did they
doesn't. I
call?
mean, it's not capitalized, so it's unclear. So, anyway, wait. Are you? Do you have your tinfoil hat on, Jr.?
Which wonder?
I just put all of them on for this one. In an eerie coincidence, it was the day, so he's getting baptized, the day another serial killer, John Wayne Gacy, is executed in Illinois for the killing of 33 young boys and men, and there was also a solar eclipse. So, I mean, All right, so we have John Wayne Gacy, also connected to MK Ultra through various means. We're not going to get into that for this podcast. Now, coincidentally, the number 33 is quite popular in Freemasonry and Illuminati symbology and numerology. So, out of all the possible numbers, we have the number 33 here. So, Gacy's getting executed on a solar eclipse, which is coincidentally when Dahmer's getting baptized.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how quickly would this script get thrown
That was a
out?
big day for serial killers.
The pair began to meet frequently to study the Bible and struck up a friendship Roy thought would last until they were old. That's interesting phrasing because Roy's already 75, right? Some people. Some people. I mean, I don't know about you, but is it possible Roy's not operating with a full deck here?
I think that's very possible.
Some people are surprised about that, but we did. I anticipated us being friends until we were old and needed walkers to get about. At the last meeting we had at Thanksgiving, and he gave me a card in which he said, "Thank you for being my friend," and things of that nature. When I learned of his murder, I felt a sense of grief because I had lost a friend. We could talk about how he felt about his mother and his father, so developed a friendship. We think of him as an insane maniac and monster, but he was more human than we gave him credit for. Dahmer's prison Bible is currently on sale from Cult Collectibles, who previously claimed to have the world's biggest Jeffrey Dahmer collection. You gotta love the Sun, don't you?
I love how like that's like the end part, like like because they probably get like a cutback of like when the auction goes off. Who would want to own any of that shit? Like really, like that's gotta be like that's pretty twisted to like want to like own like
In other
collectibles.
breaking news, right under this article is Kardashian cleavage with a K. Courtney nearly busts out of plunging gown for stepson's birthday. I mean, this is cutting edge news, JR. Like this is the stuff people wanna read about. Okay. So, another article here, Jeff's goodbye. I was given a Thanksgiving card by Jeffrey Dahmer. It turned out to be his haunting final message before he was murdered. October 10th, 2022. The minister who baptized Jeffrey Dahmer has revealed he was personally handed a Thanksgiving card just days before the mass murderer was beaten to death. In what became his haunting final message to him, cannibal killer Dahmer thanked Roy Ratcliffe for his friendship after they had spent hours together studying the Bible. And they actually have a photo of the card here. Thank you for your friendship and taking the time and effort to help me understand God's words, he said in the card. God bless you and your family. Sincerely, Jeff Dahmer.
It sounds like God killed him off pretty quickly because he didn't want Jeff doing too much research into the Bible.
I mean, here's some more interesting quotes from this priest. Okay, so Roy is 75 now, so he was middle aged back then, so he wasn't 75 at that time. It is significant to me because it reminds me of the last time we were together. It speaks of our friendship. This is important because I perceive that Jeff didn't have any close friends, and I am honored to have been one to him. So, I mean, how many people would? Now, it's one thing to do your duty to the good book and your religion. But how many people would say that they were honored to be a friend of Jeffrey Dahmer?
I think he's like obviously this guy like he was of the mindset that Jeff was just extremely mentally ill. Like
well, this is
also in a pre-internet environment. He probably didn't know all the details of anything.
Well, there's actually a couple more information here. Roy spent many hours talking to Dahmer and studying the Bible with him, and despite gaining an insight into his behavior, including cannibalism, believes the killer was changing. Quote, "It is easy to judge someone when you don't know them, but when you get to know someone better, you tend to see them differently. Jeff had changed from the murderer he had been into a better person." End quote.
I mean, I guess it's easy to do though. To just be honest with you, Bruce, like, did Jeff have anywhere to go but up? Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
but he is kind of different than other complete unhinged psychotics. I would argue there's a whole slew of serial killers that would not be possible to rehabilitate.
well, I don't think like he was like possible to be rehabilitated, Bruce. Like I think that like when he says that, it's kind of like Jeff had a purpose that wasn't killing people anymore. Like that's all we can all like it's kind of like a person with like a weak heart, right? Like let's just make sure that they're able to have a weak heart. You know what I mean? Like we just don't want them to die. Like in Jeff's case, I think that like the fact that he wasn't killing people and found a positive thing, like reading the Bible, as opposed to like watching The Exorcist and injecting people with hydrochloric acid, was probably a really big leap for Jeff.
Well, you know what's kind of weird though? If he was an MK Ultra and he had active handlers assisting him in prison, if they didn't have access to him, he might have been left to his own devices, and he truly did seek
You,
rehabilitation.
you, you mean you mean like they didn't have access to Epstein?
Well, at least when he was in solitary, obviously they did have access, or someone had access to him at some point when he was killed. But before that,
Yeah.
or they were just using him kind of as a scapegoat for all of these operations they got going on. Anyway, here's another article, also from the highly esteemed The Sun, regarding the girl that ran away from the house during the séance in their house. I know you wanted more information about that, JR. So
Yeah, of course.
so this article by Katie Davis, October 10th, 2022, Date with Death. I dated Jeffrey Dahmer weeks before his first murder. I left his house screaming when he tried to summon the devil. Jeffrey Dahmer attempted to summon the devil around the time of his first sickening murder, leaving his prom date terrified. Bridget Geiger was just
As
16.
in the counter?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, you know what? Let me see how it's spelled.
Any relation to the Geiger? That invented the Geiger? Because that would be interesting too. Like, he's got ties to like,
Well,
radiation.
his father was a chemist. Yeah, it's actually spelled exactly the same. Yes.
Oh, wow,
Bridget
that's interesting. I
Bridget
just
Geiger.
wonder if like she's related. I mean, like just like that would be interesting. Like, ties to like nuclear and like radiation.
I mean, if you're writing the script, write that in. I mean, at this point, nothing's getting rejected. Bridget Geiger was just 16 when 18-year-old Dahmer took her on her very first date to their high school prom. So let me get this straight, Jay. On her first date, which happened to be the prom, Dahmer decides to have a seance and summon the devil on prom night. I mean, is any of this surprising to you, Jay?
Well, I mean, that honestly sounds like a pure teen like horror movie concept, doesn't it? I mean, seriously, doesn't it really?
She
I
said,
mean,
yeah, she said
that
Dahmer.
sounds like something that like Tori Spelling would be.
She said Dahmer was goofy and nerdy, but didn't appear to have a mean bone in his body. He was relentlessly taunted by other kids and didn't fit in, she added. Although 2 years younger, Geiger became caught in Dahmer's web as her best friend was dating his pal. She said she was talked into going to the Revere High School prom with him, but he didn't say 2 words to her all night. Geiger previously said we went over to the prom hall, but he disappeared. I thought he went to the bathroom, but the time got longer. When he came back, they wouldn't let him back in. He'd been to McDonald's because he was so nervous at dinner he hadn't eaten enough. He was still hungry. He did apologize. He felt bad. Now, I have a question. Where was he all that time? Are there any more unaccounted for assaults or murders on that night?
I don't know. That's interesting.
He was
I thought
scared.
McDonald's was like. I mean, that was back in the day, right? Like, I mean, McDonald's was like like fast counter service. Like, why did it take all that time?
I don't know. He was scared to death of girls. He was scared to death I was going to kiss him, Geiger told Associated Press after Dahmer's arrest in 91.
I would
Weeks.
beg to argue that Dahmer wasn't scared of death. He embraced it as a lifestyle.
No, no. Well, okay. So apparently the seance was not the night of prom. It was later. So let's follow along here. Weeks after her odd date with Dahmer, he invited her over to a party at his house. I mean, this almost sounds like it could be a sitcom. But it wasn't what Geiger expected, with no music playing and no food laid out. Dahmer had also only invited 4 people and said he wanted to hold a seance. To Geiger's horror, Dahmer told her the house was haunted, and then an evil ghost sometimes told him, quote, to do things that scare me, end quote. They all then sat around a low table, and Lucifer was called upon, sending her screaming in fear. Geiger told Times Daily in 1991, the flame on the candles snapped. It scared the crap out of me. I shouted, find the light, I'm out of here, I don't want any part of this. Dahmer showed no reaction to her terror, and he never saw Geiger again. According to Geiger, the seance incident happened around the time of his first murder. She has been haunted by whether it happened before or after he bludgeoned Stephen Hicks to death on June 18th, 1978.
What happened to those other people?
According to Dahmer's classmate, he made repeated cries for help as a teen and turned to drinking, calling booze his medicine. Ted Lear, Lehr, not like John Lear, and Dahmer attended, although at this point I wouldn't be surprised if John Lear fit into the story somehow. Ted Lear and Dahmer attended Bath Elementary together and were childhood pals before drifting apart during their high school years. The computer engineer said Dahmer was a funny kid who took a wrong turn as a teen.
Yeah,
is that how you would phrase? Is that how you would phrase it? A wrong turn where one thing leads to another.
He just becomes like this sadist serial killer. Yeah, like Jeff kind of he changed in high school.
Disturbed Dahmer would draw chalk outlines of fictional bodies, pretend to faint while crossing roads, and shout things out at inappropriate times. Lear told the Akron Beacon Journal in 91, he was weird, but I met a lot of weird people in grad school, too.
Yeah, but, wouldn't this, point to, Jeff is mentally ill?
I mean, I don't know. Or Lucifer's been grooming Jeffrey, or other demonic spirits, or his father was somehow involved in drugging him, or some kind of MK Ultra experiments, even as a kid.
Doesn't this point to, back to the priest? Wouldn't you recommend an exorcism in this situation, Bruce?
I mean, I'm not an expert in exorcism, so I cannot say. But continuing on
here. Wouldn't you, at least try? I mean,
I don't know. I don't know anything about it.
He burn some sage or something?
He was funny. When we were kids, he would make funny comments about things. He was a fun kid to be around as a child. When he got to high school, he was kind of a solemn person. He wasn't as funny. Our paths diverged. There's actually a typo here in the Sun. It says out paths diverged. It's probably supposed to be our paths. So good thing they know they have good thing to know the Sun has good editors. He continued,
especially with spell check. In fact, that it's a national tabloid.
He continued along. I didn't know it was a tabloid. I thought it was a legitimate newspaper. He continued along with his craziness. Lear told how other kids made Jeff Dahmer jokes as he began to hit the bottle more and more and become a problem drinker by 18. He added, I remember in some science classes he was fairly out of control. He was an intelligent kid. He just took a wrong turn. Dahmer's drinking continued after he graduated, and he boozed his way through his first quarter at Ohio State University before dropping out. He then joined the Army, but before his 3-year stint was up, he was booted out because of his out-of-control alcoholism, allegedly. Dahmer's boozing fed into his callous murders as he would ply his unsuspecting victims with drugged drinks. He would lure his victims, almost all of them from ethnic minority or LGBT communities, back to his apartment, often offering to pay them in return for nude photographs. Once there, he would drug their drinks before carrying out his evil acts. He later told the court how once drugged, he would drill a tiny hole in some of his victims' skulls, just enough to open a passageway to the brain. Dahmer said he would then inject their brains with hydrochloric acid to induce a zombie-like state. Okay, so, and then it just goes over his demise. So, wow. I mean, what can we say about that? Just wow. I mean, does anything surprise you in the Dahmer case? I think I actually possibly might have a few things that will. So let's move on to another individual here. This is on another highly esteemed outlet of unsurpassed journalistic integrity, known as dailymail.co.uk.
Yeah.
I thought about killing him. I thought about killing myself. Male rape victims of Jeffrey Dahmer, one of America's most notorious serial killers, reveal why he stopped short of murdering them. So apparently, the guy that he tortured, that was his roommate, he wasn't the only guy.
Okay.
2 former soldiers have
And, like, how is this verified?
In the late 70s, early 80s, he served in the military in Germany. 2 former soldiers have revealed they were abused by Dahmer. Preston Davis was 20 and was drugged and assaulted by the serial killer.
That doesn't sound made up.
Billy Capshaw, well, they got photos of him. Billy Capshaw also suffered similar abuse by the sociopath. James Gordon wrote this November 2017. Serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer has been dead for almost 23 years, but the murders and dismemberments of the 17 boys and men he killed, and sometimes 8, still haunt the living today.
What do you mean, sometimes 8?
Well, supposedly he didn't eat all of his victims. Just some of them.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Two men have given interviews to reveal Dahmer raped them during his military service, are now speaking out about the murderer, who they call a sociopath. Preston Davis was 20 years old when he met Dahmer and was stationed in Germany as part of a stint with the U.S. military. I didn't care for him because of his racial overtures, said Davis to The Wrap. He was a very racist individual, and once he started drinking, he became a very obnoxious individual. Well, what's actually kind of curious is that this Preston was a black victim, and yet the other guy, Capshaw, was a white victim. So, I mean, it seems like Dahmer's equal opportunity torture. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think I don't think it like mattered. Like, I mean, just the way he was talking about people as objects. Like, I don't think it really mattered. I think like it was more like just like a lust of some kind. I don't know.
Davis, who is African American, tells how Dahmer would
Preston Davis, the name itself sounds like it came from a fucking Steve Martin movie. So, like, yeah, like, I have no idea, Bruce.
Tells how Dahmer would often drink in his barracks and would boast about his first murder victim, Stephen Hicks, whom he had killed just a year before.
Jeffrey, so he like actively boasts murder?
Hold on a second, JR. Let me finish this. Jeffrey had killed his first victim a year before joining the military, and he would get drunk in the barracks and say, "I killed the guy in Ohio." And we'd say, "You didn't kill nobody." Okay, so I guess they didn't believe him. But going back to your point about Dahmer's luck factor, so he's actively bragging about killing people. He leaves his door to his apartment open, or unlocked at least. He uses a chainsaw with complete impunity in a crowded apartment building. I mean, he parks illegally in front of police. If he kidnapped Adam Walsh, he parks illegally in front of police stations and kidnaps children in the middle of the summer in broad daylight at a busy, popular mall. I mean, this is kind. Is this?
Well, maybe he gets away with it because, like, you know, he acts like a drunken idiot. I mean, like, here's the whole thing. Like, could it be that, like, I mean, because he keeps pushing the fact that he's an alcoholic. Could it be that he was just using that as a cover? Like, he really wasn't, like, an alcoholic? Like, he just pretended to be?
Okay, it's possible. But regardless, how do you get away with that when you invite police into your apartment with dead bodies in it or park illegally in front of the police station? They don't really care if you're drunk. I mean, they're probably, if you're pretending to be drunk, they'll probably book you for being drunk as well. But even if you're not drunk, since when can you just park sticking out in front of the road, almost causing accidents in front of the police station while abducting struggling children?
I don't know. Like, I mean, you know, you'd have to ask the lady that helped him clean his apartment and the refrigerator with the body parts in it, like, you know, and, like, you know, just didn't notice anything was wrong.
He became a monster once he started drinking, Davis added. Alcohol is what turned him into a monster. Davis, now 58, tells how he was taking part in a field exercise in Belgium with Dahmer in October 1979. Their vehicle broke down with several days left to go in the training mission. Davis tells how he was drugged and assaulted. The reason he didn't kill me was that we were out in the middle of Belgium and he had no idea how to get back to Germany. Davis said
Yeah.
that he blocked the entire incident out of his mind for 30 years, but his memory of the incident started to return. My mind had shut down that whole time, he said. He ended up having to undergo therapy for military sexual trauma. It only resurfaced in his mind after seeing Dahmer's name online. I didn't find out about his death until years later, said Davis. The only thing I can say is karma. I don't consider myself a victim, I'm a survivor. Fellow victim Billy Capshaw also suffered similar abuse after joining the Germany unit and served with Dahmer between 79 and 81. Jeff Dahmer was a sociopath, a psychopath, a narcissist. He was insane, Capshaw told The Wrap. And this guy doesn't even have a degree to make that determination. It took a long time to cope with what happened, and I only came out with my experience when my father died. It was too horrible, too embarrassing, and I didn't want my dad to know. Capshaw was Dahmer's roommate during his time in the military, and he was tortured, beaten, and tied to the bed many times over the course of 2 years. Capshaw's account is documented on a website called Surviving Jeffrey Dahmer. So we went over that.
Original.com there.
So we went over a lot of this. I'll just read a couple of more excerpts here. It was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Capshaw said. I was in a room I was scared to come out of. I would steal Jeff's money, thinking that if he didn't have any money, that he wouldn't drink anymore, and therefore wouldn't hurt me anymore. Does that seem logical to you, Jay?
No. It sounds like Jeff was like, like he was using his programming drugs on it, yeah.
He beat me so badly for that, and then to stop me from screaming, he hit me harder. Capshaw said he tried to escape through the window or the fire escape. I thought about killing him, and I thought about killing myself, Capshaw said. Dahmer was eventually discharged from the military because of his alcohol abuse and began his killing spree in 87. He killed a man he met at a bar, dismembered the body, and put it in the trash. After that murder, he began to seek out more victims at gay bars. Okay, and then it just goes over all of the information we already went over. Okay, so what do you think of these two victims? I mean, the story about not coming forward until his father died, that kind of sort of makes sense for the one guy. The other guy, I mean, I'm not sure. Is it possible someone else assaulted him and not Dahmer, and he just made that connection because he saw Dahmer on the news or whatever?
It could be. It could also be that, like he wanted some sort of, reparation payment from, the military.
Okay, so now let's go to more mind-shocking content. So now we are going to SouthFloridaGayNews.com, SFGA. Serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer once lived in South Florida. May 10th, 2018, by Graham Brunk. That's the name of the writer. Jeffrey Dahmer, the cannibalistic serial killer, once lived in South Florida. With the recent release of the movie My Friend Dahmer, I thought it a good time to remind people that Dahmer lived in South Florida for a short while in 1981 after a stint in the military. The movie is based on the true biographical graphic novel by Derf Back Derf,
Yeah.
who coincidentally...
Yeah.
It's DERF and last name Backderf, also DERF, who coincidentally got his start as a cartoonist for the Palm Beach Post in the 1980s. There's a lot of coincidences here, JR. I mean, there's coincidences over innocuous things that don't make that there's no reason for there to be a coincidence there.
Yeah.
So, unbeknownst to anyone at the time, Dahmer had already killed hitchhiker Stephen Hicks a few years earlier, but none of that was learned until after his notorious 91 arrest, when police raided his Milwaukee apartment and found evidence of cannibalism, body parts stashed all over the apartment, some in jars of acid, others frozen. Most of Dahmer's crimes took place outside of Florida, but there has been speculation he killed people while he lived down here. We know so much about his time here in part because several writers have attempted to connect Dahmer to the kidnapping and murder of Adam Walsh, which took place in the summer of 81. For 6 months that year, Dahmer had been living just a few miles away in sunny Isles Beach. Shortly after graduating high school with no real plan of action for what to do with his life and at the urgency of his father, Dahmer entered the U.S. military. In spring 81, Dahmer was discharged primarily for alcohol abuse. Because military officials did not feel Dahmer's issues in the military would directly affect others outside of the military, his discharge was deemed honorable. Offered a one-way ticket by the government to go anywhere in the country free of charge, Dahmer, not able to face his father and sick of the cold weather, chose Miami. Miami was probably far from what Dahmer had pictured. At the time, Miami Beach was mostly run down and full of low-income retirement homes. With no money, he had made a home for himself among many other drifters along Sunny Isle. One day, Ken Halpert, the manager of Sunshine Subs in the strip mall at Northeast 170th Street and Collins Avenue, noticed Dahmer digging through the dumpster behind his business. Halpert invited him in for something to eat and learned of Dahmer's recent discharge from the military. He offered Dahmer a job and even put him up in a room at the nearby Bimini Motel. Now, hold on a second, JR. How often do managers of sub shops not only give the guy who's digging in the trash behind their place of business a free meal, a job, but they also put him up in a hotel? I mean, does that sound normal to you, JR? This guy's a vagrant, an old, like a, whatever, mid-20s. I don't know how, he might have looked a lot older. This guy's a vagrant digging through a dumpster.
Well, Bruce, it kind of reminds me of the Helga and Olga Rudderschmidt crimes, where they used to put up homeless people in apartment complexes, take out tons of life insurance on them, and then kill them.
That's dark, JR. That's dark.
Yeah, well, I mean, Bruce, that's kind of like the pot calling the kettle black here, wouldn't you say? Like,
well, it's good. So unless, I mean, there's not a lot of information on Halpert here, but unless he was a vet himself and he often helped vets, okay, then maybe that's plausible. But if not, this seems kind of far-fetched, for lack of a better phrasing. Halpert,
well, it was also, like, I mean, based in the 80s, like, I mean, like, it was kind of, like, there were a lot of, like, ex-Vietnam, like, people struggling, like, they just kind of came out with PTSD,
yeah, I mean,
as an actual medical diagnosis.
If Halpert has a history of this, then it's not as strange. If he doesn't, perhaps it's a little strange. So Halpert had difficulty with Dahmer as an employee. He often came to work looking very disheveled and sometimes even drunk. Often, Halpert would just send him home and try again the next day. Perhaps the most startling thing to happen during Dahmer's employment was the time Dahmer had approached Halpert to inform him of a dead body behind the sub shop. That Dahmer... Hold on a second. We got to cover this, JR. Dahmer had approached Halpert to inform him of a dead body behind the sub shop that Dahmer claims he had been stepping over all morning when unloading the trash into the dumpster. So he's going back and forth between the dumpster, constantly having to step over the dead body. Like, as if it's no big deal. I mean, would a normal person immediately inform their boss and or the authorities, or would they just gradually for hours stroll back and forth, emptying the trash into the dumpster, having to step over a body blocking the dumpster?
Well, it sounds like he was cool that there was just, like, like this body there. It was kind of almost like a nuisance. Like,
it says he's been stepping over it all morning.
That could also be a cover for, like, like why, like, his, like, DNA or anything, like, might be on the body itself.
Miami-Dade police records show that Dahmer did indeed report finding a dead body on July 7th, 81. This was just a few weeks... So, again, is this one of Dahmer's staples, like he reported a dead body that he killed himself?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, that's kind of interesting. Like, did they ever, like, go back and, like, see if, like, Dahmer was associated with that body?
I'm not sure. This was just a few weeks... I mean, I think they ruled it natural causes, but I don't know if there was a real investigation. We're going to get into that. This was just a few weeks before the infamous kidnapping of Adam Walsh, son of America's Most Wanted host, John Walsh. Adam was kidnapped from the Hollywood Mall July 27th, which was only a few miles away from where Dahmer was living. A few years ago, Hollywood police closed the case and pinned it on Jacksonville serial killer Otis Toole, who had already died in prison in 96. I like the phrasing of this article. They pinned it on.
Yeah.
But was Toole really guilty? True crime writer and former reporter for the Hollywood Sun-Tattler newspaper, Arthur J. Harris, had set out to trace Dahmer's time in South Florida and has written several books on the topic. He is the reason we know so much about what Dahmer did here. Harris is convinced Dahmer may have been responsible for this crime. Many witnesses reported Adam was kidnapped by someone in a blue van. Sunshine Subs owned a blue van that employees regularly had access to that disappeared for days on end often. I mean, what kind of operation is this guy running at Sunshine Subs? I mean,
I
there's
don't
dead
know.
bodies near the dumpster. He's hiring transients who come to work drunk and doesn't fire them and puts them up in hotels. His employees have complete unrestricted access to his van to do anything, anywhere, anytime, and disappear for days at a time. I mean, this almost sounds like some kind of drug operation.
Well, I mean, like, he might have been on blow. I mean, it is like South Florida, like during like the '80s.
Fair enough. So did Dahmer have access to this van? Could he have used it to kidnap Adam Walsh? Harris did present some interesting observations. Exactly 2 weeks before Walsh was kidnapped, a young boy named Terry.
You know who suffers here, Bruce? The customer. I mean, like, how much care was really going into the sandwiches? Like, when
All right,
you got
hold on.
dead
Well,
bodies, you got transients.
how much possible human pieces were going into those subs?
Well, I don't know about the human pieces part, but I mean, like, just like, I mean, we got all this drama surrounding the sub shop. I mean, like, it's the customer.
Well, it's Dahmer. It's Dahmer, and it's Miami. I mean, there are probably a good amount of transients that were never even reported, and vagrants who were never even reported missing that nobody even knows about.
It would have been interesting, like, if they did, like, a Miami Vice, like, episode. Like, like, that would have been fun to watch. Anyway, go ahead.
Exactly 2 weeks before Walsh was kidnapped, a young boy named Terry Keaton was playing in a similar Atari display in the Sears at the Twin City Mall in North Palm Beach. Keep in mind, one of Dahmer's victims was last name Sears, and there's these two abductions that are taking place at a Sears.
Yeah. As well as, like Kmart was bought out by Sears.
Well, the Kmart one might have been unrelated. Okay. A man attempted to grab him, and Keaton got away, but not without making quite a ruckus in the store. The attempted kidnapper also got away, but several people got a good look at him. Enough so that the North Palm Beach police were able to publish a police sketch which resembled what Dahmer would have looked like at the time. And you know what's curious? Because Toole was a bit older. He's got a receding hairline. He's got a completely different structured face. He looks completely more like a vagrant hillbilly with a misshapen head and face. He doesn't really look like Dahmer. So like it's kind of weird how the cops think that it might have been this guy. It's just really weird. But anyway, Harris, along with Willis Morgan, a witness who claims to have seen Dahmer at the Hollywood Mall that day, looked into more about the man Dahmer found behind the sub shop. They located an abandoned meter room next to the dumpster where the body was found. Relatively untouched since 1981, there was an aged axe leaning against the wall and what looked like blood spatter. So hold on a second, JR. So, what is this? Almost a decade later or more? There's a meter room that nobody bothered to clean up with an axe and possible blood all over the place. So, would it surprise you that if Dahmer happened to use that axe for either Adam Walsh or other possible vagrants or transients, he just left it there without even bothering to clean up? Does that sound like Dahmer?
I mean, yeah, it kind of does, but, like, at the same time, like, I'd also say, Bruce, like, if I was a tenant or I was, like, paying the utilities, I'd be pretty pissed off that, like, no one ever checked the meter.
No, well, this was the sub shop. Oh, maybe they did check the meter and nobody batted an eye at the bloody axe. Or depending on where the meter is, if the meter is located in front where you wouldn't necessarily see the axe and the blood. So this discovery was so intriguing, ABC's Primetime even did an investigation with luminol, which did indeed prove there was blood on the wall. Let me guess, though, the blood was never tested.
Of course it wasn't.
I mean, no, that's my guess. It doesn't say whether it was or wasn't. I'm just wondering. So, is this perhaps where Adam Walsh was killed? Again, we may never know, but it is indeed an interesting coincidence. So, let me get this straight, JR. So, Dahmer is working in a sub shop where a dead body happens to be by a dumpster. He's working at a sub shop where there's a room where there's blood and a bloody axe, and where he has access potentially to a blue van that is spotted at the mall where witnesses place an individual who happened to look like Jeffrey Dahmer abducting Adam Walsh.
Oh, and by the way, he also has an obsession with like bringing like body parts and stuff to his other jobs. So like,
Yeah, that's
he's
a
got
good
a
point.
fixation of
That's
he's
actually a
got a
good point. I didn't even
fixation.
think of that. Yeah, he had him either at the chocolate factory or the other place he worked at. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's got a history of taking it with him to work.
It's like it really does seem he's doing everything he can to get caught. He doesn't. His whole place is littered with evidence. He brings the evidence to work and stores it there. I mean, what more can he do to get? I mean, his name is on the police report of dead bodies found. Like, what more do you want from this guy other than walking into a police station and giving a full confession? Although, from the details, he did admit to even drugging and handcuffing that other victim when the cops finally came up. But were those cops not? Were they not part of the whole government conspiracy MK Ultra program?
Well, he
And
also like admitted to injecting them with like stuff into their brains, which he
no,
probably
that was
wouldn't have
after the
had to.
fact. I'm talking about before he was caught. Because even before he was technically guilty of anything, he freely admitted, like the last surviving victim, he actually admitted to doing that to him, which he alleged to the cops that were right there. I mean, he didn't even try to hide it.
Yeah.
So he has a history of like doing all these things. Now there's also blood and an axe at his workplace. And a dead
Well,
body.
and a body.
Yeah, and a body previously found there. Like, what more does anybody need here? I mean, this coincidence stack is a mile high.
Well, it's not just that. Like, when you think about it, Bruce, like, why was he like rifling around that dumpster?
I mean, he was just. Oh, you mean before he got his job?
Yeah,
Oh,
like,
he was probably just looking for leftover subs to eat,
or
right?
he was leaving something like inside.
Well, maybe we'll never know. Dahmer was asked about the Walsh case in '91 after his arrest. He denied having anything to do with it. Hollywood police eventually dismissed him as a suspect since it did not fit his typical MO. Though in reality, it would be hard to tell if Dahmer was responsible for more killings than he admitted to. It is known that he very much did not want to be subject to the death penalty, which did not exist in Wisconsin, but did exist in Florida. Harris believes Toole was spoon-fed information by police and often got a lot of information wrong before he got it right concerning the Walsh case. And also don't forget he was signing away his story right.
Yeah.
And since by the time police closed the case in 2008, Toole had already died, it seemed easy to pin it on him. As for Dahmer, unable to make something of himself in South Florida, his father wired him money to return home by the end of the summer of '81. The rest of Dahmer's story is history. If you'd like to read more about Dahmer's time in Florida and his possible involvement in Walsh's murder, check out Arthur J. Harris's Jeffrey Dahmer's Dirty Secret or Willis Morgan's Frustrated Witness. Both offer great insight in the case and what South Florida was like at the time. According to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, NamUs, there are currently 6 unidentified bodies that were found in Broward and Dade counties from the summer of '81. We don't know who the victims were or what happened to them. Could these be additional Dahmer victims? At least 4 of them fit Dahmer's primary interest of young men. And again, can we really get past the fact that there's a dead body in a room with a bloody axe at Dahmer's place of employment?
Yeah.
I mean, does that sound like it could have happened with, I mean, what are the chances that has nothing to do with Dahmer? I mean, I'm just asking.
Bruce, I gotta tell you, this is one of the most mind-shocking episodes out there.
Yeah, there's actually plenty more to go over. In the next episode, we will be delving even deeper into the Adam Walsh case, and there will be even more mind shocks that I think will even leave you surprised, believe it or not.
Bruce, I'm gonna say that, I believe that.
So tune in next time for our ongoing Jeffrey Dahmer series, where we continue to examine everything that, of course, Netflix left out and doesn't want to touch, which is kind of their MO when covering so-called official stories
Yeah, I
regarding.
think we've completely blown them out of the water so far.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, there's just so much more. It's just downright mind-shocking and unbelievable. So tune in next time for our ongoing Dahmer series and check out all our other series on Mindshock. We cover the most diverse content out there without falling for logical fallacies and remaining objective and neutral and considering all possible theories, unlike any other podcast out there. If you enjoyed the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing out.
And JR tapping out.
Catch you guys next time.